faith community here in Fresno, and has been a member of the OTO, so she's a ceremonial magician. She's practiced Shivaism, and then she started her own church of Lucifer. Now, listen with an open mind. Lucifer in this case is not the Lucifer of Christianity. It's a different character. So this is part of what she's going to be talking about, what the differences are. And I think the talk will be very interesting. This is the first time she's given it for my classes. So when did you start your church?
Two and a half years ago now.
Yeah. So
Officially as a legal entity on paper. Yeah. We are a federal nonprofit. We are a local charity here in Fresno. We run a feeding campaign where we go out quarterly to different parts of town that have high populations of homeless people, and we feed them full meals 4 times a year, and then we do water campaigns in the summer, and that's just one of our ways of giving back to the community. But yes, my name is Tambra Asher. I am the Presbyteros of the Church of Lucifer. And so for the next 50 minutes, I want you to forget about what the fairy tales have told you, or what your mom's church told you, or who you think the concept of Lucifer is. Because as over these next 50 minutes, we're going to talk about different cultures and different times that have the same similar story, that there's a fallen hierarchy of angels that have rebelled against God. And so we're going to explore some of those today, and we're going to connect some dots so that there's less misconceptions about Luciferians being Satanists, and that the two are synonymous for the same thing, because they're not. So in 1966, Anton LaVey started the Church of Satan, and it was an explosive, rebellious statement to the world at the time when it happened, because it was coming into that, free love and hippie and the love era and the pre-war days and all these things and illusions that the society itself was dealing with. And so for Anton LaVey to come out and start a Church of Satan to worship the rebel fallen angel of the dogma of the time was the shock that the system really needed to kind of create change. So the primary difference, though, between what a Luciferian is and what a Satanist is it lies in our focus. So for Luciferians, we emphasize more of it like spiritual enlightenment and wisdom and upward growth. So you'll find many, if not most of us, practice some very deep-seated, rooted traditions of meditation and Eastern philosophy and just philosophy in general. So whereas a Satanist will traditionally focus on the more carnal natures of the soul, you'll find that there's less spiritual practice there. And if there is a spiritual practice there, it still is highlighting their carnal natures, or a definite change from the status quo to the norm. It's more of an adversarial current than the light of what Lucifer is. So if we translate the word Lucifer, it literally translates to the light bringer or the light bearer. And there's the very first mention of Lucifer in any kind of Bible doctrine was in the 4th century when St. Jerome wrote the Vulgate, which is now what is the modern day King James version of the Bible, excuse me. The one mistranslation of it, though, was it was talking about the word in Hebrew called Hillel, and is that the right pronunciation? Okay, which means shining one. And it was translated to Lucifer, which means light bringer. So that scripture that was originally mistranslated, you'll find at Isaiah 14:12, but it was talking in reference to the king of Babylon at the time. And so they were calling him the Shining One. And later on, and as the translation stuck, the church elders kept the word Lucifer in that one scripture in the Bible. And so that's where they tied the adversarial Satan label to Lucifer. So that's just the history thereof. But you'll find, like, even in Arabian legends, there was a story of an angel that was cast down from heaven. So it's a parallel story to Lucifer. And that was told by the Islamic prophet's main disciple, the disciple of Muhammad. So that's in their tradition of Islam. And then you go through, like, if you've heard of the book of Enoch, where it's talking about the watchers that were sent down to heaven, and they ended up having children with the earthly women, and then so on and so forth. And it's talking about the fallen angels or the watchers. So there's another reference to Lucifer or Satan. But the light bringer, or the morning star, this is what will tie the connection into the planet Venus. So Venus is called the morning star, right? It rises first thing in the morning, and you can see it when the sun sets. So it's only visible to us in a very short amount of time. And so that is parallel to a story from Babylon talking about that each of the stars was a deity and a god, and it was like the fallen one, and so it was punished in Venus, the ruler of the underworld, so on and so forth. And without taking you all down like huge amounts of rabbit holes, there's all these different tie-in connections. But then when George Leland, is that his first name? George? Let me look. When he wrote Gospel of the Witches, which is one of the main modern day occult books, he talks about Aradia, Gospel of the Witches. He talks about the goddess Diana, which is one of the patron deities in modern day witchcraft. And she refers to Lucifer in that book as not only her brother, but her consort. And if, as you study religious anthropology or cultural anthropology, you'll see that there's a lot of kind of ancestral ties in some of these pantheons. So, but what it's actually stated as saying is, Diana saw that the light was so beautiful, the light which was her other half, her brother Lucifer. She yearned for it with exceeding great desire, wishing to receive the light again into her darkness. So throughout time, you've seen that as mankind has progressed in its knowledge, they have progressed in their spiritual views of things, and you can begin to see that certain cultures are worshiping or kind of parallel to each other, because that divine language is going to speak to them in the language that they understand. And so, but one thing remains the same, is that it's all these religions are in search of the light. And even Christianity, to a certain extent, they have Jesus Christ as their savior, or the light. And there is a school of thought that Jesus Christ and Lucifer are one and the same, in that it's the same coin. It's just two sides to it. And so there's this divinity that has always been with the light. And when the patriarchy really started to try to influence its pull, not just politically, but religiously, and as they invaded these different areas of the world, they just kind of incorporated a lot of their religious practices, but they also demonized a lot of their religious practices in order to try to gain control of the people. And so this is my first lecture in like 7 years, so I'm a little bit nervous, you guys, please forgive me. But so if we connect the dots from like any of the light bearers throughout history, let's say if we use the Greek pantheon. So like Hecate is a torchbearer. So she's the light in the dark places. We can connect it to the goddess Diana. I connected Lucifer through my worship and devotion to Lord Shiva because of his Venetian influences. And so then you go through and you start connecting these dots and you realize that the light is everywhere. And so it's kind of funny to say that everyone has already been worshiping Lucifer without knowing it. And I don't mean to offend anyone in this room that might have a different perception. You'll find in certain Luciferians, they do adhere to that archetype of Lucifer being the fallen angel from heaven, the defector, the one that rebelled. That archetype is an important archetype to work with because it challenges us to really be responsible for ourselves. And that's a main core tenet that you'll find in Luciferianism, where we are striving to be our own deity. And so there's a self-deification process that goes with that. So there's a certain level of personal responsibility that also comes with that. Luciferians absolutely object to any harm of other human beings or animals. Hollywood has hyped up the satanic panic in such a way that even actual Satanists will tell you that they don't actually worship Satan. They're worshiping a construct or a rebellious vibration, perhaps, but they don't even believe in the actual Christianized Satan. The devil and Satan is a Christian concept, and so a lot of us don't relate to that, being that we don't follow Abrahamic religions. And again, going back to other cultures and times, that they all have a very similar, rebellious story, same as the story and concept of Noah and his ark. Well, if you look in the Sumerian text, you'll find that same tale, but under Gilgamesh. And so you see these same stories being told over and over in just different ways. And in all actuality, a lot of it is just to try to control the people, for them to not have their own free thinking and responsibilities. And so us as Luciferians, or if we identify as a Luciferian, you'll find that some of us find that in the concept of deity, and then you'll find that others find that in more of an atheistic or scientific approach to it, like a vibration. And all of those things are true, because again, the light and the energy is going to find us in a way that we understand it. Have I confused you all successfully yet? Anyone want to ask anything on anything we've talked about so far? And your objections, I do not mind talking those with you as well. We all have things that we can learn from each other. It all broadens our perspectives and our viewpoints.
So far, so good.
We can talk about, okay. So there's some very popular authors that are kind of the current book list that Luciferians would be reading or inspired by. The Temple of Ascending Flame, you can find them online, and they have all of their rituals published. They do campaigns from time to time where it's a group ritual online where everyone is doing the ritual within a certain window time period, and it's just kind of a way of connecting and delving deeper into your own personal practices. Some people will tell you that Luciferianism is a religion, while others will more say that it's a philosophy or a lifestyle. And so we don't go and ask for new ones to join. They join when the light finds them. So we're not going to go out and go door to door or any of those things. There's been other secret societies that have been that don't usually go out and recruit members well, and one of them is the Masonic group. And in the higher levels of teachings in the Masonic group, there's even the words of Lucifer mentioned. And so you'll see that it's in just everywhere within society, it's just been tried to be hushed up and quieted for quite some time. But you'll also find that the majority of people that adhere to living in the light, they are almost like a moral, I want to say moral authority, but they're far and few in between. And so we tend to try to just become bettering ourselves and not worrying so much about gaining new members, if that makes sense. And so one thing I'll say about the more public groups that are out there that are considered left-hand path, like the Satanic Temple, for instance, and although I don't adhere to the teachings of LaVeyan Satanism or any of the other variations, they have done so much for humanity in that they put themselves out there. They just won a Supreme Court win from the state of Arkansas to have their Baphomet statue at the Capitol alongside the Ten Commandments. So they're fighting for all of our religious freedoms. And then they're also fighting for women's reproductive rights and the other campaigns that they're doing. And so they do a lot of charity as well in that way. And they take the hit for a lot of other groups, where we don't have to go out and do that. We are just free to feed people and have our wonderful rituals and parties. So what is a left-hand path? Okay, that's good. So if we really boil it down to it, the true left-hand path is actually Tantra and the following of the Shiva Shakti, because as Shakti sits at Shiva's left hand, she's his guiding force and his creativity. And so that is, Shivaism and Hinduism is defined as a left-hand path. In occult terms, the left-hand path is more of working with the shadow self, taking more personal responsibility for our actions and consequences, working primarily with the darker aspects of our psyche. If you study any Jungian psychology, you'll see that he talks mostly about working through our shadow self. And once we merge the shadow into or heal the parts of the shadow, it really makes us more of a complete person / magician / whatever you have. Whereas the right-hand path, or like the path of Wiccan, there's several different branches of the tree. They primarily work with things outside of themselves. So it would be like the worshiping of their deity, or the worshiping of a practice of herbology, or whatever you have there. But it's not working with the shadow side or the left-hand side of our subconscious. And so that's what would define what the difference is between a left-hand path and a right-hand path. And I'm not sure what all groups here in town have already come to talk to you guys. What we do have commonly with other branches of the pagan tree is, some of us that do practice magic or witchcraft, there's that common understanding, and it would be the same across, the spectrum from each other. But like I, for one, if I'm gonna work with magic, I usually tend to work with the darker aspects of the deity. So it would be like I'd work with Lilith, or I'd work with Hecate, or I'd work with any of one of the underworld goddesses, because that's where I'm drawing my energy, and that's where I'm focusing my subconscious. So it's almost it sounds weird to say it this way. There's a self-psychology and a self type of practice that comes along with the work that we do, because it boils us down to the very core of who we are. And once you really know and understand the core of who you really are, that's when you can really start to create effective change in your life, in the world around you. It's when manifesting becomes a lot more simple and natural and organic. And so it's just tapping into just a higher, different frequency and consciousness is what we strive for when we're working with energies like that. Angel, you have anything to add?
What would be an example of one of your rituals? How would one of your rituals go?
Okay, so, well, if we're working with a energy or a deity, an archetype, or a demon, and I use that word in a friendly sort of way, the 72 Goetic spirits, or primarily most of the demonic entities that we work with, are aspects of our subconscious. So Aleister Crowley actually developed this theory and practice that the 72 Goetic demons and the 72 archangels are within our mind and within our subconscious. So when we're working with those energies, we're working with that aspect of ourself, and every one of us has those same aspects of ourself. So if we're working with a Goetic spirit, then we would start by traditionally, you would want to be in a respectful situation and place. You would cast a circle, not so much for protection from the spirit you're working with, but from protection from outside influence, distractions, other spirits that might want to venture in, this, that, or the other. So we would cast a circle. We would say the spirits in, which is their calling, their name, their vibration, and we would recite and meditate on that in to bring forth the spirit. Then, depending on the spirit, and depending on what gifts or aspects or offerings that they might require, we would make contact with the spirit and then petition the spirit for our need. So we're trying to heal our sister. So we would call upon a spirit that is a healing spirit. We would ask the spirit, to work with us. And then sometimes the spirit might require a few drops of our blood. It might require a gold coin. It might require, there's different things that each spirit expects or wants as far as an equal exchange goes. And then that's as simple as that. You would then thank and close the rite and expect that this spirit is now in your employment. So that's a simple way to do it. Then of course, we do honor the elementals. So we would call forth, to the east, we would usually call forth Lucifer, the Lord of Air. To the south, now a Satanist or a Satanist/Luciferian would call forth Satan in the south. We tend to call forth, there's so many other fire deities. Sometimes we would call forth Lilith, or we would call forth Farius, or there's a number of fire elemental spirits that we would call forth to protect and to honor that direction. And then to the west, Leviathan, and so on. To the north, Belial, or there's other earth energies that we would call forth. So it's similar in witchcraft in that way. We use different words. We use different deities. And so Luciferian witchcraft is very similar to all the other branches of witchcraft, but the difference in all of us in general and even with each other is our focus, is our intention. And so again, that kind of just goes back into talking about that if you're practicing any sort of paganism or witchcraft, technically you are already worshiping Lucifer, because that's what it has been called by the dogma of the church, by the definition of light itself. And a lot of people have that programming from the families, or from, like, for instance, my family, my parents are Jehovah's Witnesses. They are definitely not happy or thrilled with my life choices and who I decided to become or be. But it's interesting to see that we all have that programming. And so when I first rebelled against my parents' religion, I was an angry child, and so I was like, well, I'm gonna worship exactly what they hate, so I'm gonna become a Satanist, and I really tried. I read all the stuff, and I respect a lot of the stuff. It just, all of it didn't resonate with me. And so then, as I progressed in my life and my spiritual evolution, and then I was an eclectic pagan for a while, and then I joined the DCWA down south, and then I joined the OTO, and then I just have been a seeker for the last 35 years. And then it just kind of all came together, and the dots connected, and everything clicked into place, and I was just like, this entire time, it's been Lucifer. And so that's when I decided to start the nonprofit, the organization, and then in these last 2 years, we've just established our charity more. We've done the charity of feeding our homeless outreach for 5 years. We've only been organized on paper for 2. But we also hold 2 big festivals every year here in town. The next one coming up is in September, and it's going to be again at Roding Park, and it's an umbrella event. So it's called the Fresno Pagan Spirituality Festival, and we invite any and all practitioners, mundane people that are just seeking, anyone that wants to come and explore all the different branches of the pagan experience here in town. Penny also does the same thing with her pagan pride events that she facilitates and hosts. And it's surprising how many different variations of paganism are actually here in Fresno. So, to break it back down, with all my babble that I just said before, and thank you for humoring me, Luciferianism is a belief system that will include both theistic and non-theistic beliefs. So you'll find, again, some that find Lucifer in the concept or the archetype of the Christian perception. And then you'll find others that have a more pagan or earthly view of it. You'll have those that are more scientific, and it's a vibrational thing, and very much more like agnostic atheist kind of stance on it. And none of those are wrong. It all goes back to what we understand and what we can connect with. There's also that story of the Greek Titan Prometheus. So he would also be considered the Greeks' version of the story of Lucifer, where he stole the flame from Mount Olympus and gave it to humanity. And it wasn't just a physical fire that he gave to the humans. That fire represented knowledge and advancement and technology. And so he's in some people's perspective, the creator of man and the earth. And so, when we connect all of those rebellious acts and stories of folklore and of religious background, we can see that there's always been that present need for the little spark of rebellious nature to question everything and to sort things out and to learn things for ourselves. And so that's the true nature and basis of what is Lucifer. And so as Luciferians, we just strive to live up to those same principles of, not compromising, not being dogmatic or dictator, but not compromising and just holding to the truth. And so you'll find that that's a common theme through Luciferians as well.
Anybody have any questions?
Yes.
So if someone approaches you and asks about the church, you say you don't actively recruit, but when someone finds the light, what's kind of like the first steps that person takes with the
We run a background check.
background check?
First
So that's
thing-
what I do first. I'm in
And,
charge
and
of
that's
it.
because, as you know, we live in a day and age where there's so many people out there that have, that are either straight predatory in nature or dangerous or violent or there's a lot of trauma out there that people react to in different ways. And so,
In the best case scenario,
best case scenario.
like someone who's not.
Who
who's
passes
Oh,
the
like
background
that
check?
passes the background check.
So,
So we hold lots of public events monthly.
yeah.
We also hold private events. And so we first would want to meet someone in public, or have that conversation. And I like to get an understanding of what other people's perspective of Lucifer is, so that they're not under any misconceptions in joining the church. They're not gonna come in expecting that we're gonna be all hail Satan and having orgies every Wednesday, or whatever it is that some of these groups do and call what they call Luciferianism. And so we wanna make sure that our prospective new family members of the group understand, that we can all have different perceptions and ways of approaching Lucifer, but we're not under any delusions of whatever. So then once, we have those conversations and the group begins to meet, the person, we just, the vibe is either gonna be there and they're gonna be in the right place, or maybe it's not the right place and the next place is, it's hard to say. When we've been approached as our members and as over these last few years, people have joined our group and we've become practicing together and very tightly knitted. It was an instantaneous knowing, like on both sides, good or bad. And I'm not saying that we're some elitist group and that you have to be able to walk on water or whatever to impress us. That's not what it is. But you're sharing energy with, if any of you join any magical order, not just ours, any order at all, you are sharing energy with people, consciously and unconsciously. And so you want to make sure that you guys are all on that same frequency, so that you don't get stumbled, or hurt, or spiritually damaged. There's a number of reasons why it's the right group will know when the right group will know, and so then we have rituals of acceptance. We have different, if someone wants to take a vow to the group, it goes on and on from that point. But we get together outside of our spiritual practices too, you know, because we become so tight-knit that we're all just like kind of a big family at this point. We have on our council for our 501c3, you know, we all have a role to play in that board of directors. But we all have this funny, like, sparring, friendship, sibling type thing going on too. But we all just seem to work together, and we all have that common goal of making sure that we can feed people, making sure that we're available to share information, general helpfulness, general kindness, you know, just our own personal tenets and overall group tenets that we have. But like we have open meetups every few months where we'll like go to a Denny's somewhere, to Me and Ed's or whatever, and we post about it, and people want to come out and meet us or ask us questions or just get a more casual introduction to us, as opposed to someone off the internet passes a background check and it's like, let's go to ritual, you know. We're not going to do that to somebody, so yeah. We try to dress formal for our rituals, and the reason why we do that is because it helps us shift that consciousness. So our dress code for any rituals, and even for some public rituals, is either ritual robes or all black. And it's just so that it's all kind of a unison, you know, mind shift. And so that's generally to kind of alter our, you know, perceptions and get us in the kind of vibe of being in ritual or accomplishing the
Team Madrigal.
That's my plan. But like I briefly mentioned, I have a background in like all sorts of different forms of named paganism. But it was when I discovered, I had some very good friends that went and initiated through the Sharanya Temple in San Francisco, which is a temple to Ma Kali. It's kind of a westernized variation of Hinduism. But so some friends that initiated into that, and I didn't, not because I didn't want to, but it wasn't my path. And so, but it kind of introduced me to a lot more Eastern concepts. So I started reading about Shiva and about, you know, all of the things connected to Shiva Shakti and all of those things. And it was that experience that actually helped me discover that Shiva is a face of Lucifer, same as a lot of these other deities in other pantheons. And so it was kind of really helpful to me in my own spiritual practice to just connect all those dots and realize that it's all just part of one bigger picture, you know. And those that don't practice the left-hand paths, those right-handed pathways, those are also equally as amazing and important, because it does eventually end result for our souls is the same. It just takes a different amount of time to work through the process, unless you just jump deep into the deep end, you know. But that's always also been kind of my learning style. And you know what I accredited it to? When I was like 6 years old, and they gave me swim lessons, and they actually threw me off the high dive, right? And I was just like, sink or swim, Tambra. And maybe that's where that whole concept of getting in over my head before I understand what's happening came from. I don't know.
Wow.
But, yeah.
What would you say is the goal of the Church of Lucifer?
Our personal goal?
Mm-hmm.
Well, to spread the light, to help those find the light, to help our local community who is in need. We have that in any spiritual practice. Once you have learned and mastered a concept or are in the midst of learning and mastering a concept, it's your spiritual responsibility to uplift those around you. And I'm not saying gain followers or turn people into sheep or follow, that's not what I mean by that, but to uplift the world around us. So, and as we uplift ourselves, we uplift everything that's around us. And so our main goal would be to just help expand, of course, the right to the light and the information, but to expand the compassion and the word itself so that others can light others' candles and so on and so forth. We have 2 chapters, actually. We have 2 charter chapters, one in Lafayette, Georgia, and one in Boise, Idaho. And so, there's 3 of us now. I think at one time, Michael Ford, the author, he had the Greater Church of Lucifer, but I don't believe he opened it up to like any kind of charter chapters or any type of like, hey, do this in your own area.
Mm-hmm.
It was more like just, he's an author, he's brilliant. I don't mean like that. But we are actually registered as a religious nonprofit. We are in the midst of writing our own Bible so that we can actually have governmental church status. So that's the last thing that we have to do to actually be called a church. We're a religious nonprofit right now. But the 2 charter chapters that are in Georgia and in Idaho, they are beginning to run their own charities there, and they're beginning to have social meetings, and it's not necessarily to even have other people join our coven when we have these social meetings. It's more of like a connection, because to walk the Luciferian path means that you are alone. You are a solo practitioner. We have a group that we do practice together with, but it's also for community. It's for like-minded type, relationships and things of that nature. But we still also all independently have a daily personal practice that we do not share as a group. And so, and that's just the nature of the light. It's the nature of the story of Lucifer. He'd rather be alone, he'd rather fall from heaven than to bow. And so it's a certain type of individual that's usually attracted to walking that way.
Anybody, any other questions?
Let's see. If you guys would like to find out what we are doing around town or any events that we're having, or check out any of our social media accounts, you can visit www.churchofluciferusa.org. And we have a beautiful member who is a web designer who does a phenomenal job at making sure that stays up to date with all of our activities and things. You don't have to be a member of the church to volunteer for our outreaches and things that we do for the community. You don't have to be a member of the church to volunteer to help us with Fresno Pagan Spirituality Festival if you'd like, or with Krampus Festival if you would like. We do both of those, and we need lots of volunteers because it's free for the community, because our goal is to spread the light and spread information to everybody and not, have a good time and not charge people and make a bunch of money or whatever, because it's
Our
trash.
next public event is May 1st. We are going to be doing the maypole up at Trimmer Springs Campground up at Pine Flat Lake. They're having a fire festival that weekend for Beltane. It's a weekend camp out. But Friday night, the 1st, we're opening the event with actually doing the maypole ritual. So I don't know if anyone is interested or ever seen one.
It's fun.
You're welcome to
Organized
come up.
chaos.
Yeah, and we all weave the colors and the dreams into that pole for the year. But that's our next public event. And then after that, we have our next outreach for feeding is June 6th. Like Angel said, you know, you don't have to be a member or even a Luciferian to come to any of our events, to come and feed people or to come and participate in any of the social things that we do for the community. We work well with the other groups here in town, so, you know, all are welcome at any of our groups, so.
Why don't you say a few words about what Krampus is, just because not everybody would know.
So Krampus is it's a old German like heritage story where he would be the counterpart to Saint Nicholas. So Saint Nicholas went on to become Santa Claus, right? So in the ancient original story, Saint Nicholas and Krampus would travel together, and Krampus was always portrayed as kind of a very devilish looking figure, or with goat legs, kind of very scary in that way. And the story that they would tell the children is that if Krampus came and you were naughty, if you were a naughty child, then he would put you in his basket and he'd take you and whip you all night on Krampusnacht. You got to come home the next day. He didn't really kill anybody, but you know, he would discipline you. The good children, the night after that happened, the good children would be visited by Saint Nicholas, get all the Christmas presents, you know, rewarded for their good behavior for the year. But in Western societies, they often view things that are scary or misunderstood, or things that look like devils or goats or whatever, to be the, you know, representation of what is evil. But actually Krampus is a Nordic tale, is that right? Yeah, Nordic, and that he's just there to, whereas now in Western civilization, Krampus has been reduced to a lump of coal that the naughty children get. So they've kind of softened down this lesson for the children. Because I guarantee you, no child in Germany is going to be bad the entire month or 2 months prior to that night. But it's just, you know, that also goes to show that different societies and cultures have the same similar stories, just told in a different language or a different way in which society at that time understands.
And also all over the world and in the United States now, people celebrate Krampusnacht for hundreds of years. In Germanic countries, they've celebrated Krampusnacht, where they have people dress up like Krampus, and they have the chains, and they have their birch branch whips, and they parade through town to scare the kids into being good. Like, that's the idea. It's just
and
fun.
It falls on December 5th. So
like most any Yuletiding celebrations, December is the darkest time of the year. And in the northern half of the world, it is so dark for so long. And without sunshine, we all get very depressed. So a lot of these traditions come from just trying to have fun and be lighthearted during a dark time where there's lots of light, there's lots of people, and food, and just so you have serotonin in your brain and you have that happiness, because so many people, just because there's no sun, they end up, you know, killing themselves or terrible things happen. So the more we can party and the more we can come together in dark times, the better it is. And so I think as the Church of Lucifer, we really embrace that, because we work with the shadow side. That is what we do. And so if we embrace the darkness together and shine light into it, then we can get through anything. So that's why we as the Church of Lucifer do Krampusnacht here, because we think that it's a beautiful representation of what we want to portray to everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for your time today.